my goal is to have a more flowing process with your customers throughout the build. I take a lot of time to go over what we do because certain phases of construction aren't as visibly appealing, so to speak, to the customer. You know, we're doing the foundation, we're doing the groundworks, we're doing all the inside stuff. It's not that cool framing factor, so to speak, that everyone gets excited about, which in turn, the time frame from building your foundation to getting to framing, the customers kind of fall off track and are like wondering, hey, are we still progressing like we're supposed to? So I try to give my customers that knowledge just to, in that sense, they can kind of follow along with me, if that makes sense, so they can calm their brain a little bit and ease the mind as far as, hey, we're moving, this is what we're doing, this phase takes X amount of time. And obviously every house from a timing phase of construction is different. You know, this house to build a foundation takes 3 to 4 days, where you go down the street, there are several other houses that take 5 to 6 days. Your project manager will know that information and can verse the customer on that. But the overall goal for today is to more so give you all the knowledge to be able to communicate with your customer, to allow that process to flow in phases that aren't as aesthetically appeasing, such as framing. You know, framing, as I mentioned, everyone's like, oh, we got a house. But unfortunately, there's a lot of steps and phases that happen before we can build the house, if that makes sense. Today, I think, is a good phase of construction of where we're at, just because after this, the next thing we do is cover it all up with sheetrock. So you're not going to see any of this. At this point, we've had plumbing rough-ins, we've had HVAC rough-ins, we've had our gas. This is where we come in, do our frame check, which I've made several notes on the walls, which I'll explain today as well. After this, we'll head into electrical rough-in. We'll do the electrical walkthrough with the customer, and I'll touch on some stuff to bring up to your customers. As we mentioned, and I always say this jokingly, but I'll throw out suggestions to my folks to add before, you know, at the electric walk. It's not me trying to be a salesman. It's me knowing, hey, it's going to cost that customer a lot more money to add this after the fact versus doing it now while you got wide open studs. So I'll throw a couple things out there that I always like to bring up. But as I mentioned, just having that knowledge of the markings, if that folks says, hey, and I purposely left that broken window behind us there, having that where a customer who's not in construction to someone who's not sure, they're going to think the worst. They're going to say a rock hit it, or a kid shot a BB gun, or whatever it may be. But just to give you guys the ease and the knowledge on how easily that is fixed will help ease that customer's mind too, not let them slew on it all weekend, so to speak. You can say, hey guys, it's a 5-second fix. Troy purposely left it broken because Murphy's Law, every time I change it out at this phase, it gets broken again. So I purposely will leave it broken for a little bit, and then of course change it over once we get towards getting HVAC and air on the house. So there are certain things to expect with it being construction, and I'll touch on a lot of those things today. Before I dig into the weeds too much, I try to, and I call it my scribble scrabble, but it's what we do at a frame check. So you'll notice on the sides of the doors, I've got, trying to do this so everyone can see it, but right in front of you, you've got the size of the door opening there, which will say 2/8 LH, and then there's an arrow. So that's marking the size of the door, the swing of the door, and which way the door is swinging. A lot of folks really dig into, at this phase, especially like my wife, for example, like she don't care about the roof on the house. She cares about where's the couch going to go. And that's an important thing. And a lot of folks start digging into furniture placement. With that being said, door swings, door sizes take a big play in that. So just to give you guys a brief kind of verse on how to read that marking. So that says 2/8. What that stands for is 2 foot 8 inches. So that's the size of the door. LH stands for left-hand swing. The easiest way that I can say to explain that to your folks, the side of the door that I write the markings on is the hinge side, okay? So put your back up against the door, LH, swing to your left. Now you can tell your folks, hey, you've got a 2 foot 8 door swinging to the left. That door swing is going to swing right up against that wall where the pipes are. Exactly right. Another thing to keep in mind, 2 foot 8 inches is the door opening, okay? I've framed that door 2'10". So I framed them 2 inches bigger than the actual door that goes in. The reason behind that, once I add my door casing, my trim, it's gonna shrink it, if that makes sense, okay? So we frame it 2 inches bigger than what the door will actually be. I've had folks, it's rare that folks will ask me about it, but I have had those customers that walk around with a tape measure and measure door openings and kind of double check us. But again, it's something that you guys can utilize and tell them about moving forward. But another big thing I get asked, my spray paint that I've done on these studs here. So that is what I call a bowed stud. So we'll actually go out through at this phase, take a level and measure all the studs in the house. A bowed stud is one that's out of plumb, so not a straight line. We really focus on areas like the foyer, you know, behind Miss Miley. When she walks in the door, everyone's eyes are gonna look straight down this hallway. So if I have a bowed stud on this wall, it's gonna stick out like a sore thumb. So we really focus on areas like that. But I paint it, my framers come in, they correct it. The way they corrected this one, obviously they cut the bowed area out, added a new stud, put their level on it, confirmed that it was corrected. That's how I follow back and know that my framers have came in and done it. But again, that's my spray paint. I always bring that up because some houses are different, you know, depending on the framing crew. You could have 20 bowed studs or you could have 2 bowed studs. But if there gets to be a lot of spray paint, there's nothing wrong with that. That's why I'm here doing my job. But folks I've noticed have asked, like, what's all the spray paint on the walls? And if they ask you guys that, now you can tell them, hey, that's them doing their frame check. That's a good thing. If you go into a house of this phase and notice there's no markings on the floor, it would be concerning to me, I guess, just because someone's not checking behind the framers, which is very important. Another big thing I like to talk about at framing is, and I don't know if anyone has seen a framing crew work and how they operate. They rock and roll. You know, it's nothing to come here and have 8 to 10 guys, saws, generators. I mean, just crazy. So a big thing that I've noticed is my folks during that framing process really just every day they'll pick something, if that makes sense. Ease your customers to know that their main goal when framers start is to get a roof on it. Obviously, the purpose behind that is because we don't want the lumber to get as wet, you know, as possible. All the lumber that we use is meant to get wet, but we don't want it to continue getting wet, put it that way. So ease your folks' mind, you know, yesterday. If this house didn't have a roof on it, it would have gotten soaking wet. We spend a lot of money getting the high quality lumber that we have that is meant to withstand those elements. But again, the overall goal is to get it dried in as quick as possible. My point behind saying that is that is my framer's main goal. So if they didn't frame that window on that garage day one, that doesn't mean they're not going to come back and add it after the fact, okay? And I think that'll also ease your folks' mind, you know, if they come out on a Sunday and notice a window's missing. Don't let it ruin their day. You know, all of that stuff is an easy fix to add in, but obviously they can add a window a lot easier than like adding a garage, if that makes sense. So just play it case by case, but the main goal of the framers once they get started is to get that roof on. So just a lot of questions have came from that, and generally once they finish up, they'll circle back and do what is called a punch out, and they'll catch those aesthetic things, the door opening sizes, missing windows, little minor things like that. Okay, any questions on that before I move on to the next topic there?
Troy, how do the kind of talk about the checks and balances from the framing crews? How do inspections protect everybody involved?
So the inspection process in each municipality is different, but I can talk on Hanover since we're in Hanover. My trades, so when I say a trade, I'm referencing plumbing, HVAC. They are responsible to call their own inspections in when their job is complete, okay? I don't call like this house has not had a framing inspection done. The reason behind that is because my rough end guys, HVACs, electrical, we want to make sure they hadn't drilled through anything that's weight bearing. That is why we do the framing inspection at the end. But again, I encourage folks to go third party. I mean, we at RCI have nothing to hide. I encourage your folks to do one. And if I were to spend the money to do a third party inspection, I'd probably do it at this phase and then maybe at the end of the build. Again, it's one of those things where you can never have too many eyes just because a big house, there's so many moving parts. A second opinion always helps. Certain counties are more strict than others on their inspections. I know Hanover is pretty strict on stuff, which is good. We wouldn't want it any other way. But inspectors look at everything, and to answer your question, each trade is inspected separately. So an HVAC inspection will be done, a plumbing inspection will be done, a gas inspection will be done. And they used to do them all at the same time. And talking with the county officials, they started breaking them down to sub-trade inspections because it's not as overwhelming for that inspector. You know, when he were to show up and have an HVAC inspection, plumbing inspection, gas inspection, framing inspection, it is a lot easier for someone to miss items. So now we have their own inspections dedicated to that particular trade. We do framing at the very end. That way all the rough-ins are done, so if they did cut something that wasn't supposed to be cut, those inspectors would catch that. That, I would say, is the toughest inspection we'll have throughout the process, just because there is so many things that can be looked at and failed for, you know, hangers, all that good stuff, which is why, again, it's at the end. So once that framing inspection is done, obviously electrical will be done at that point as well. Once we pass framing, we're heading into insulation. Insulation will get inspected, and then from there we're hitting sheetrock. Okay, so, and that's a good question. Does anyone have any questions on that as far as inspections are concerned? Cool. A big thing I like to hit on, and I would definitely recommend telling your folks at this phase, more so wait till electrical is done. I highly recommend them coming in and videoing the house before we cover it up. I can't tell you how many people have tried to knock out an item on the honey-do list, and next thing you know, they flood their house because they hit a water line. You know, right behind Mr. Dean there, we've got our hot water heater pipes. If someone were to mount something there and hit that line with a screw, they would know it very quickly. So what I like to recommend is just take a video. Tell them to walk around with their phone and just video the wall, and then down the road, if they go to hang a mirror on the wall, they can pull up that video and say, hey, I'm in the clear, there's no pipes here, just to give everyone the peace of mind. So that's definitely a recommendation I push hard. You'll notice we've got plates on the bottom. So at the bottom there is called a nail plate. The purpose of that is when we put up like the baseboard or the trim, we don't obviously hit the pipe, but there is no nail plates obviously up higher in the wall. So that's where that video would come into play. Okay. Jumping to kind of where we're at here, and I may shift over a little bit to the kitchen. So I've got my cabinetry laid out. The reason behind that is my plumbers, HVAC guys, they know exactly where the cabinets are going to be. So, and right now they're written in verbiage that the average person wouldn't understand, you know, BF, H36. That's nothing that we need to know. It's more so for the cabinet folks saying which cabinet's going to go there. It's a 36-inch cabinet. But just tell your folks where you see stuff like this written, hey, that's your island. That's where your island's going to be. I also have gotten marked the sink center line. So it tells my plumbers where to put their pipes. You'll notice we've got 3 pipes here. So you've got a hot, a cold, and then your drain. Okay, so that's why there is 3 pipes. That'll be the case at all water fixtures for the most part, and we can touch on it like in the master bath or primary. But again, jumping across here, you notice we've got these cabinets laid out as well. REF, of course, stands for refrigerator. My plumbers know, hey, let's put the ice maker supply there. It's super helpful having that laid out. From an electrical standpoint, it tells my electricians where to put outlets. By code, certain areas of the house, such as your kitchen, your laundry room, garage, have different code requirements from an electrical standpoint. So that is also why we have it laid out. Because again, it tells the electrician, hey, we've got a cabinet here. Don't mount your outlet 2 foot off the ground, because if they did that, obviously the cabinet would cover it up. So that's another reason. You'll notice I've wrote gas cooktop, vento exterior. All is a case by case depending on the house. But if it is gas, by code, we are required to vent it outside, which is this vent that you see here. I've noticed a lot of folks have brought up, hey, I paid the extra money to vent my hood. I don't see it. Well, they wouldn't see it once I cover it up with sheetrock, okay? the way, the inner workings of this vent here is vented outside. When my guys come to install their hood, they'll actually drill a hole through the sheetrock into this vent and connect their ductwork that way. I bring these things up, and it's just questions that I've been asked, just because I feel like if y'all get asked, it might be helpful to know. So just know on that, our vents are hidden in the walls. You're not going to see it unless, obviously, at this phase. But when you move past this and hang sheetrock, you won't know it's there until, obviously, unless you go outside and you can see the vent coming out the house. Trying to think of anything else in the kitchen before I move on to some electrical stuff. Does anyone have anything for me kitchen-wise? Perfect. Jumping into that electrical walk, which I know we talked about. So this is the phase. I've actually got this electrical walk through this Friday. We always want to have the house super clean. Again, it just shows off our work. We're proud of what we do. Super clean, but at that electrical walkthrough, make recommendations, have them think more so on specialty outlets. By code, we're required to have X amount of outlets based on X amount of feet on the wall, so that'll be covered for them. New construction is more so obviously the code. I have a lot of folks that get, that anxiety about the electrical walkthrough, thinking they're gonna have to locate every single outlet in the house. That is not the case. By code, as I mentioned, we have certain outlets that we have to lay out, more so focus on those specialty outlets. Hey, we're in our utility room. Do you plan to hang a vacuum on the wall here? If so, let's put an outlet. TVs, that's a big one. Building a new house, no one wants to have wires hanging from the bottom of their TV. If you plan to mount a TV above the fireplace, let's add an outlet above the fireplace. Things like that I felt is helpful versus just telling them, yeah, we're going to do electrical walkthrough, you're picking out everything in the entire house. Because that's not necessarily true. Obviously, they have a lot of say with lights and stuff, but that code really helps us a lot as far as taking the pressure off the customers, make sure they got enough outlets, all that good stuff. But, garage, if your customer is a woodworking guy, maybe he wants to have a workbench. Sir, where do you plan to have your workbench? Let's put an outlet here. Those are all things I bring up, and it's all trending. I've noticed as the years have gone on, like a lot of folks are transitioning away from cable, going strictly to data. That's a question to bring up. I used to ask about landline phones, and now people laugh at me. But we always used to bring that up, like in the primary. So data versus cable is a big one. If you have folks that are on the fence about not sure what they want, I always say just pick one location for that cable to go. Because now they've got those genies, and I'm referencing DirecTV, but they got those little boxes that you can put behind the TV. So just one cable will give you access to the entire house if you'd like to go cable throughout. In my case, I've got data in my living room just because I like to watch football, and my wife is a Netflixer on the internet, and she likes to lay in the bed and watch TV. So we put data in our bedroom, and then of course cable above the TV. Things like that to personalize it to your customer, I think means a lot coming from you, because it shows that you are concerned with what they're doing after we're done, if that makes sense. Offices, hey, you work from home, your office is going to be here. Maybe we add a couple outlets. Maybe we add a floor outlet. We add that hard data line if they're doing a lot of Zoom calls and virtual stuff. Obviously, a hard internet connection, in my opinion, is always going to be better than Wi-Fi. Again, it's a case by case, but if someone works 100% from home, I would definitely recommend throwing a data line in there. Any other electrical questions that you guys may have for me? Wyndham, anything to add on that? No. And guys, this is...
when you're just walking through, I would think, what is that brown line right there? Is that a low voltage line right there?
So that's for your thermostat, for your HVAC. It is a low voltage line, but it's where the thermostat will go. So this electrical walk hadn't happened yet, so it's Friday. But the low voltage lines definitely look different, of course, than your electrical lines. Generally speaking, I'll let my electrician start, Monday, Tuesday. My low voltage folks will come in after the fact. But this is the phase to talk about surround sound speakers. Sonos speakers is a big thing that folks do. At this phase, as I mentioned before, and you try to find a fine line of like not trying to sell them to do more stuff, but it truly, from a cost standpoint, is going to be the cheapest to do it now versus when you put sheetrock up and then you're cutting sheetrock, getting their house dirty and having to vacuum up dust and all that good stuff. So I definitely, if it's a thought that they may have and it's obviously a reasonable price, you know, adding an outlet is $45. So it's like, let's add it if we're at this phase versus after the fact. We all know a tradesman is not going to come out to someone's house for less than $100 nowadays. So pay $45 and we get it, we're good to go. And that's kind of what I hit on a lot. But did that answer? Yeah. Low voltage wise? That brown line that he brought up is a great example of what a customer may say, hey, what is this? I know that it's, and you can always, before you answer, you can follow that line and it's going to run right to that air handler there. So that is for the thermostat. At this phase, it's pretty easy to tell just because there's no wiring ran at this point. Once you get wires everywhere, it gets a little confusing, but we'll always mount that thermostat in the most kind of central location of the home. A lot of times we'll stick it in the corner there if it's a long hallway to the bedroom. Try to keep it up at a height where little ones can't adjust the temperature to their own liking, but that's definitely what that brown line there is. Okay?
With that, are there any locations that people overlook putting an outlet that might be good?
I'm a big believer, and it's called a whip. So we've gotten away and strongly encourage the floor outlets is a big thing. You know, in this particular space, if someone has a couch sitting here and has a lamp, well, they don't want to stretch that lamp cord across the house. That would be a great location for a floor outlet. Prep for it at the electrical walkthrough, but don't install that floor outlet until the furniture is in. I've actually gotten to the point now where we'll prep, put a whip is what it's called, in the crawl space for it. After the customer's closed, get furniture in, then they'll install that floor outlet in the exact location of where they would like it. I can't tell you how many times I've had people come out here with cardboard cutouts of their couch and laying it on the floor, and it's still not right. At that point, if it isn't in the right location, fixing it is an issue because obviously we've got to fix the flooring, all that good stuff. Floor outlets are big ones. Garages, a lot of folks have like a deep freezer or a garage fridge, so to speak. Definitely note that. Don't just put in a standard outlet. By code, in the garage, we're required to be on what is called a GFI, which is basically a water-sensitive outlet. With that being said, all the outlets are tied in together. If we were to put a refrigerator outlet in there and you say, oh, I'm not going to add a refrigerator outlet, I'm just going to plug into what we've got. Well, by code, those outlets self-test once a year. Lord only knows it's going to be in the middle of August when it's 110 degrees out. Your outlets in the garage are going to self-test. Everything that's in your freezer or refrigerator is going to melt and spoil. So those are things that I would definitely bring up. Yes, it costs a little bit more money to make it what is called a dedicated circuit, but it is on its own circuit, and it's not, you don't have to worry about the GFI stripping and everything that's in your freezer spoiling. That's a big one. TVs are the biggest ones, and then just be mindful, like a lot of folks are doing wood ceilings on the rear porches. Areas like that is where I really try to get the customers to think about the future, just because adding an outlet and a wood ceiling after the fact that they don't have access to is a heck of a lot tougher. But that would be the most important, I would say, is refrigerator, freezer outlets, floor outlets, and then just ask your customer to think about kind of what they're utilizing certain spaces in the home for.
Exterior outlets too, like if they're big on like vacuuming their car all the time, I don't know why anybody would do that.
Holiday lighting.
Yeah, holiday lighting.
Exactly, and we have the holiday folks. I call them the holiday folks, but which I am a holiday guy as well. But we have some that are crazy. Like, I mean, just I need 10 outlets on the front porch for Christmas decorations. If you sense they're like that, we offer a Christmas package, which is basically there's a switch in the house that one outlet underneath each window, you flip a switch on the wall and it powers that outlet, which in turn would turn on the Christmas candles, all that good stuff. So those are things that I would just recommend if you're sensing your customers are, love to light up the house come Christmas. The exterior outlets is a great one. Those are a lot harder to add after the fact. You're talking about replacing siding, etc. So the outside outlets are definitely a big one as well.
Probably lighting too, to a certain extent, like floodlights and stuff like that.
100%, and you'll notice like certain packages. So for example, our Emerald series, we have 7 recessed cans that come as a standard. Odds are we're adding more than 7. And it's more so, and even think about in y'all's case from a resale standpoint, what are the biggest areas that folks that sell houses is kitchens and bathrooms. Recommend maybe spend a little bit more money. You're paying all this money for a ceramic tile shower that's going to the ceiling. I would recommend adding a recessed can in there just to highlight the space. It can get dark, and a big thing with the lighting is think about, in this case, it's going to be a glass shower door, but our bathrooms upstairs where it's a curtain rod. Bring that to those folks' attention. Once you put up that curtain rod, it's going to knock down a lot of that natural light coming from your vanities. So that's where I would recommend adding a light. Unfortunately, everything that I'm bringing up, I've had folks mention in the past, so it's nice to just kind of add to the memory bank and just bring up. But little things like that are big. Dimmer switches is another one. If you do put those recessed cans in your bathroom and you wake up at 2 in the morning to go to the bathroom, the last thing you want to do is flip the switch and light the bathroom up like an airport, So maybe talk to them about a dimmer switch if that's something that bugs them. Under cabinet lighting, we use ours at our house as a night light, so to speak. It's not as bright beaming of a light. So that's something, again, I have some folks that just light the house up to where they're glowing, and have some people that are concerned with lights being too bright. So it would more so be feeling your customer out to see kind of where they're at with their lighting preferences, is what I would say on that front. Any questions for me on that? Cool. I'm going to avoid going into the weeds too much with some structural stuff, but I do feel that it's important just because I have gotten questions in the past of, well, why does that beam look different than that? It's all weight bearing. Guys a lot smarter than me are telling us where the point loads, so to speak, on the house are. So this will be a point load where most of the weight's hitting. In turn, we've had to add an LVL here. That is why it looks different. It's all shown on our plans, not so much the plans that you would probably give to your customers, but that is why it's different. We can't drill through this guy. When my electrician comes, he'll write in big, bold letters, do not drill through. Those are all things that the inspector talks about, and you'll also notice it's called posting all the way through, but this beam runs all the way up to this triple truss here. So the trusses are what we've got here. It's posted all the way up, whereas everywhere else, we've got a 2x4 top plate, okay? That is a code requirement to post all the way through. That way, this triple truss is sitting directly on this versus sitting on that top plate, which in turn could squish or crush or whatever it may be. So that's why certain areas of the home do look different. Above y'all's head right there is another place. And it's all based on the structural, so it's not gonna look the same in that house next door. It's all based on what kind of house type we're building and where we've got the most, for example, above the garage door, that's a wide opening there. We've got a big LVL above it. Why is that? Because we've got a 16-foot span there that we can't run to the ground. So you'll notice certain areas like that. But they're called LVLs, and that's why they do look different, of course, in our conventional, framing lumber. While we're all looking in the garage, you'll notice I've spray painted insulate all over the walls there. This particular customer, and this is not the case by code all the time, this particular customer wanted to insulate the entire garage, which is why I note it just so everyone sees it and it's not something that gets forgotten. Just know if your customers ask from an insulation standpoint, anywhere that is up against conditioned area, meaning you have HVAC, needs to be insulated by code. So in this house, per code, we only need to insulate this wall here and this wall there, because that is the only thing that's buttoned up against. Upstairs is finished, so the ceiling will have to be insulated as well. That's the easiest way that I recommend talking to your customers, is say, hey, if that wall backs up to anywhere that has air on it, it will be insulated. But if it doesn't, you know, for example, once you get past that front door, that wall by code is not required to be insulated. So you'll notice half the wall insulated, half of it's not. Why is that? Well, because that's up against your exterior of your house. By code, it doesn't need to be insulated. Again, it's a case by case based on your customer. Again, these folks paid the additional cost to insulate the entire garage based on their future plans. Okay. On insulation, I know that's a common question that customers ask. Is there any questions that y'all may have on that I can help y'all with from an insulation standpoint? That is treated as an inspection as well, a separate inspection in its own. So the inspector will come out and strictly do an insulation inspection, again, the day before we head into sheetrock. You'll notice certain areas of the house, and this isn't a good example, but if we had like a fiberglass tub, it's called a pre-bat. So that wall behind you there in the shower, you notice the Lehman Brothers contracting, that's called pre-bat. So we'll insulate certain areas of the house before we install that fiberglass tub, which we install that fiberglass tub at framing. And the reason we do that is because once we frame the walls up, the tubs don't fit. So we won't install them, but we'll set the tubs or in showers from a fiberglass standpoint at framing. That's another question I get a lot is, we're just framing the house. Why are my tubs and showers sitting in the front yard? You know, they're wondering what the heck's going on. Well, that's why, is because they won't fit once the house is framed. There's a good example of that behind you here. So fiberglass shower, you notice this back wall does have insulation up. The reason behind that is since we have set that shower, my insulators will not be able to insulate behind it. So that's why there's a little bit of insulation added, but not the entire house yet. It's just setting us up for future plans. Okay?
Troy, what would they hang versus what would they blow?
So areas that they can access would obviously be where they would hang. Blowing areas, for example, above there, when they come in and I have sheetrock up underneath where the mechanicals will sit, you'll have plywood. There's no way for someone to get underneath of that, so that's where they'll stick the pipe in and blow the insulation versus called, you know, the bat. Bat will be on the walls. Bat's easier, cleaner. From an effectiveness, they're both the same. We add X amount of inches of bat to obviously accomplish the same amount that the blow would obviously require as well. Another big question, and again, guys, you'll notice I keep bringing up questions that I get. I'm doing that by design because, again, I want you all, if your folks ask you, to have that knowledge to answer it as well. Why is there water in my bathtubs? Did someone come in here and take a bath over the weekend? The answer is no. By code, I am required to fill up my bathtubs. It shows the inspector we don't have a leak. It also, I have to put pressure on all my plumbing lines. Behind Mr. Dean there, you'll notice a little gauge on that water heater. It's like a little bite gauge. My inspector, at that plumbing inspection, will come look at that gauge and make sure it's holding PSI. If it's not holding PSI, my inspection fails, and what that tells that inspector is, hey, we might have a leak somewhere. So that's another way that plumbing does get checked, and that's also why there's water in our bathtubs at this phase of construction. In the wintertime, because obviously we're freezing, my plumbers do come back once we pass that inspection and let the tests off, is what it's called, just because we don't want that to freeze up because there's no air on the house. This time of year, we as the builder take the tests off. You'll see it on there a lot longer than like wintertime because they let them off the same day so nothing freezes up. You'll also notice in the winter, the water will be pink or orange in the tubs. It's antifreeze, so the water doesn't freeze in the tub. So that's why it's clear water now versus a colored water come wintertime. You'd be surprised how many questions people ask on that. So that's why. Okay. Any questions on that? I know I'm kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but I'm trying to think of questions that I've been asked that, you know, I could pass on to you guys as well. Any questions on that? All good? Cool. Again, guys, I taught a frame check class for our PMs. Me and Wyndham did a couple weeks ago, and just going down the list, I think it's important for you guys to know what all is done at those inspections as well. It's quite a lot, but it's super important, and that's just us taking that extra step to try to get that home as close to perfect. You notice I say close to perfect just because there is no such thing as a perfect home. I'm very, you know, strict on saying that. We get it as close as we can, but there is going to be human error, and I think having your customers prep for that up front, know and say, hey guys, the first time you guys meet them, hey guys, we're here for you. We're going to have a great process. But hey, if you see something on a Sunday, don't let it ruin your day. You know, we can take care of it. There's no such thing. Until we have robots building houses, there's going to be human errors. When the robots come, I don't know if me and Wyndham will have a job because we're not going to know what to do because it goes perfect every time. But until then, we're going to have human error. It's our job to catch it and correct it and hopefully stop it before it happens. So I think that's important, just prepping your folks for that. We talked on the bowed studs, talked about plumbing. Another thing plumbing wise that I think is important from a gas standpoint and hose bib standpoint, talk to your folks about those locations. You know, I always think it's important to have a hose bib on the driveway side for washing vehicles. Note that customer though, hey, I may not want to put it on the front of the house because you might have a hose reel. Is it going to bug you to have a hose reel in your front flower bed in front of your house? Some people say yes, some people say no, but it's something to talk about. The other thing is the gas locations. You know, is your customer a big grill guy? Would it be beneficial for him to have a hard gas line going out there versus a propane tank? Those are all things to bring up. You know, from a gas, do they plan to add a future generator? Having that generator plumbed now is probably a lot cheaper than doing it after the fact. Obviously, those whole home generators run off of propane, so having that hard pipe gas line would be something that I would add if they have any kind of thoughts of doing that in the future. Any questions on plumbing before I jump to the next thing? Cool. HVAC. Talk to them about those exterior unit locations. And again, it's so funny how some folks don't care at all about where it sits and some folks really care. You know, and when I say the exterior unit, I'm talking about the loud thing that goes off, I guess, when the air turns on. Obviously, we wouldn't want to put that up against someone's bed wall. So those are things to think about. You know, I know on this house, we put it on this side because when it does turn on, it's not up against someone's, you know, pillow while they're sleeping. All the things like that to think about. Gas backup. I've noticed a lot more gas backup here recently. It's all preference, but basically that gas backup will kick in at a certain temperature. And I've noticed a lot of elderly folks going that route just because I think naturally they get colder quicker than, you know, I do, if that makes sense. But the gas backup, if it hits, I know we set ours at 32 degrees. The second it's 32 degrees outside, we're gas backup. It's just extra help for that unit. From a cost standpoint, yes, you're going to spend more money in gas. But I definitely think the gas offsets the price that you'll pay for electrical. So it's kind of to each his own on that. It's obviously better for the unit to have that gas backup just because it's not pushing so hard electrically to keep a house 70 degrees when it's 20 outside. So, but cost-wise, I think you'll break even, maybe a little bit more savings with the gas standpoint, but it all is based on what propane or natural gas prices are at the time. I know they fluctuate, but that's something I like to bring up too. Fireplaces, more so for the building end of things, but the stone, the brick fireplaces that folks will select from time to time, don't let it discourage them about putting a TV up. You know, I have a lot of folks that think if they do stone, they can't mount a TV to it. Of course you can, but definitely let's bring that and make note of that. That way I know, hey, they're planning to put their TV there. We'll put their outlets there. Of course, we'll have what is called a ledger board. So it's basically a piece of blocking, so to speak, for the TV to screw into. Those are all things that would help us on our end too, knowing about before we put it up. Because as you all know, once that stone goes up on the fireplace, it's quite an ordeal to take down. So we want to prep it. We talked on electrical. Just some note-taking stuff. You'll notice in all of our houses, we'll have our selections and plans on the windows, which I've got there. That's a big help if you're walking it with your customer and they say, I can't remember what kind of flooring I have in this room. Well, all of our houses have our selections on that front window. So if you go over and look at it, it'll say kitchen, LVT, you know, and that'll be a good way to direct them and help answer any kind of questions they may have, as well as the plans will be up there too. The plans are more so for our guys in the field, but it also helps your customers visualize. And I try to find a fine line. I'm in houses every day, so like to me, I can visualize, hey, this is the living room, that's the kitchen. But your customers who may not be in a house that's framed may not have that ability, so showing them will give them a better visual of where they're at in the house, you know, at this point of construction. We talked on the door swings and door sizes. Do y'all have any questions on that? I know that that's a little complicated, but can certainly be helpful from an electrical standpoint too. You know, we probably don't want to put an outlet directly behind a door. So talk to your folks about that if you meet them out here before our electrical walkthrough. This is all framing stuff for us. A big thing is access doors. If you don't point them out, you'll never notice them until they're installed, and then your customer may say, I hate the way that looks. The access doors are a code requirement. So a good example of one will be this guy here. It's a framed rectangle, so to speak, in the side of the wall, more so upstairs than downstairs, but by code, we're required to have access to areas. So that access door will feed this truss area above. I always like to bring that up so it's not a surprise. The code is actually 30 inches or 30 square feet we're required to have an access door to it. Again, it's not something we enjoy doing. It's kind of the code. Again, each municipality is different, but I think it is helpful, at least prepping your folks, hey, you'll have an access door. And I'm sure you've seen them in some of our models before, but just if you're walking a model and you see an access door, hey guys, just want to make sure you see that. That way it's not a surprise come, you know, when it gets installed in your house. And it also helps them set up like furniture placement, where they plan to hang pictures and all that good stuff too. Trusses, which obviously we know trusses are the triangles, so to speak, that sit on the house. This here is a truss that is spanning obviously from end to end. In this case, this truss will butt in to this LVL here. As you can see, again, I'm not going to spend too much time talking on trusses, just more so getting y'all the terminology to know a truss versus a 2x4. Yes, that is a 2x4. This is a 2x4, but this is a bottom chord of a truss, which also uses a 2x4 member. So just keep that in mind. Generally, folks won't get too much into the weeds on the trusses and structural stuff, but I feel like it's always good information to have if you may need it. Subfloor is a big one. Even if your folks don't build with RCI, I definitely think the subfloor is a huge component from a structurally sound house. I know here at RCI we spend quite a bit extra on this Advantech subflooring. It is a high quality, and this is where you're going to notice the squeaks in the floor, and it's unbelievable. And Wyndham can touch on this, but like something as minor as a little bit of flexion can cause a door squeak or cause a floor squeak. You know, you walk and it's great. No customer wants to hear that on their new house. This also is meant to withstand the elements, and again, I say that like yes, we need a roof on this house, but if this subfloor does get wet for a week or 2 weeks, it's going to be okay and it's meant to withstand it. That is probably the most common question I get, is folks a little uneasy about their house getting rained on, which I 100% get. I mean, it makes sense. They're spending a lot of money on a house. The last thing they want to do is see it rain in 1.5 inches like it did yesterday on all their lumber in the house. Just ensure them that it will be okay. The M word that no one wants to say, mold, this lumber is meant to withstand it. Again, if the area continues to stay wet, you will notice a little bit of algae buildup. It's okay. We do treat for it. We can spray and get it removed. So if that's, you'll notice certain folks are big on focusing on things like that. Just ensure them that it is okay and we can treat for it, and their house is not going to rot because it's gotten wet for a couple weeks. Okay.